Welcome back to the Blister and Muck podcast. I'm Jenny Mason, your host and the creator of the Blister and Muck series. This week, Blister strikes it rich when he bucks tradition. Does he make lasting change, or will he lose interest? Here's the deal. In 1831, a French gentleman traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to the United States because he wanted to study a new creature the world had only recently discovered. Evidently, this creature had existed for some 5 decades, but observers and experts still weren't sure why it behaved the way it did. The gentleman was Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville was eager to understand an all-new creature known simply as the American. You see, in the 1830s, the United States was still a new country. Its people, the Americans, seemed bizarre to the rest of the world. They talked funny, and they dressed funny. And, more than any other nation, people in the U.S. were super active volunteers. Volunteers. Sounds like a musketeer's drowsy cousin. In fact, a volunteer is a person who undertakes a task for free. In my town, some people volunteer to walk dogs down at the animal shelter. Others volunteer to tutor students struggling with math or reading. Some people volunteer as firefighters. Others volunteer to make hot meals for the homeless and displaced families. I volunteered to teach martial arts, dancing, or to help people vote. The time Americans invested in volunteering stunned Tocqueville. It's worth mentioning that the 1800s were a particularly active time for volunteers in the United States. In the land where all people were supposed to be created equal, millions suffered due to stark inequalities. Luckily, women and young people turned out in droves, volunteering to reduce poverty, enable women to vote, and abolish slavery. Nearly 200 years later, Americans still stand out as the world's most active volunteers. And recent research indicates that volunteering makes us healthier people. Volunteers are happier, less lonely, healthier, they live longer, and develop fewer brain diseases later in life. Teens and young people who volunteer feel happier, more confident, and develop more self-worth. I mention this historical context because this week, despite having a yen for all things self-serving, Blister finally sees the many hidden benefits of volunteering. You might say he finds it rather cointagious. As you'll recall, when we left off last time, Madam Putreska had just received a distress signal. Both Blister and Muck find a way to pitch in. However, Blister's strategy may prove costly. If he's not careful, he could pay so dearly. Episode 15. The Volunteer. Madam Putreska sliced the red envelope open with a claw. She removed the letter written on red paper. "This is not being a language I know," she complained, then read aloud. "Salamu Hodari Panya Mawanamke? What is this meaning?" "Greetings, mighty rat lady," Muck translated. Everyone stared at him, except Horchata, who stared at nothing in particular. With all eyes weighing on him, Muck slouched. "Oh, He knotted his tail around his paws. "It's Swahili." "Swahili?" Blister crossed his arms over his chest. "Yes, Swahili is an African language. Actually, it's a franca lingua. That means it is a common language spoken by many different tribes." "I know what Swahili is," Blister fumed. "Why do you speak Swahili? I don't speak it. Putreska doesn't speak it. Puss doesn't speak it. I'm pretty sure Dr. Stowe and Seltzer don't either." Dr. Stowe and Seltzer shook their heads. "So why do you speak it, Muck?" Muck turned his ears down. My sisters and I had a talented tutor supervise our education.
A tutor? You had a tutor?
Yes, of course. How else could we have learned the sciences, geography, arithmetic, French, German?
And Swahili, Blister concluded. You silver whiskers never cease to amaze me. Maybe you two could be fighting over this later. Right now, we have lots of real problems, okay? Okay.
Putreska directed Puss to escort Dr. Stowe back to the infirmary, where Seltzer might help with Horchata's recovery. Next, she handed the letter to Muck.
Would you please translate? I am needing to know what this says. Red is meaning more than urgent.
Blister leaned close to Muck's ear and whispered,
Don't do it without naming your price first. Always name a price.
Oh, I don't mind being a valiant volunteer, especially in an emergency. Muck skimmed the letter and explained. This letter comes to you from a Mr. Itchy Tusk. Not sure I've translated that right.
No, is right. I have heard of him. He does what I do, only in Africa.
There seems to be a herd of oryx in trouble, although I'm afraid I have no idea what an oryx is.
Is like desert deer with two horns that twist up in air, Putreska said.
Ah, an unusual ungulate, Muck said. It goes on to say that this herd of oryx needs a new home because they were, frankly, I don't know what they were. This is not a word I know. Muck pointed to the letter jumble. Putreska and Blister both inspected it, but neither could define it, so they shrugged.
Doesn't matter what happened. I am thinking Arizona territory is perfect place for them. Is big desert there with even bigger canyon. Perfect for oryx to be hiding in. Muck, if you will help me write back to Mr. Itchy Tusk, I will give you lessons in martial arts. What do you say? You want to be learning judo and karate and jujitsu?
Both Muck and Blister gawked. Oh, opulent opportunities! Yes, I do. Indeed, I do.
Perfect. We can start today. I am sure Blister would prefer to be spending his day alone. I would? I would.
Blister puffed up his chest. He tried to fill it with confidence and bravado, but really it was only air.
Of course I would. Always do. That's me. A loner. Yep. Always alone. Good. Get going. I'll make sure Muck is getting home safe and sound and fed.
Once again, Blister's jaw nearly smacked the floor.
Fed? Don't I get fed? Why would I be feeding you? You are not a valiant volunteer. Bye-bye for now.
Putreska hooked her arm around Muck's and led him away. Out of the caverns under XS Capital Bank, the baguette clouds had cleared, and the sun glazed the city's surfaces with an egg-wash sheen. Blister kicked at the dirt and said many not-so-nice things about Putreska and Muck. When he was calmer, he found two small consolations to celebrate. One, he did not have to deal with a pigeon molting up the bell tower anymore. And two, he did not have to teach Muck how to survive in the city today. That left him free to go find his own food, alone and unhampered. Blister thought the discovery of such freedom ought to have delighted him. Instead, his whiskers sagged, and a new kind of hunger rumbled. It did not come from his stomach. Instead, it rang through his bones, like an earthquake, cracking the earth's crust into canyons. Ignoring these inner tectonics, he set off for Atramental Avenue. Some time later, he hopped off a shiny, beetle-black barouche box carriage in the Adumbral Fields district. Blister boggled at a world carved from sugar. Clean sidewalks and polished cobblestones stretched for miles. Pristine white paint coated the opulent three-story homes. Gleaming quartz crystal and marble columns adorned the stately facades. Clean glass windows winked. Flower beds choked the warm summer air with perfumes. Hypnotized bees sang a steady yum as they swooped from bloom to bloom. Here the gentlemen and ladies promenaded the sidewalks rather than rush. None of the dogs were stray. The stately hounds, poodles, and terriers led slender leashes. The ladies' dresses were bigger and grander than any Blister had ever seen before. The gentlemen's mustaches and sideburns were the bushiest. The fabric of their suits displayed bold stripes or squares in burgundy, green, or blue. Gone were the gray, brown, and black fabrics of the poorer neighborhoods. Much to Blister's relief, any children he saw were corralled into small gardens and yards, trapped behind formidable iron fences, their play much restricted by expensive and heavy garments. He found the number 4 townhouse. Poplar trees stood out front like sentinels. In one of them, a black cat knocked a bird's nest from the branches. On the ground, the cat pawed at the yellow slime, creeping out from under the broken nest. Finding slime boring, the cat trotted away. Blister proceeded with caution. He regularly swiveled his ears and tuned his whiskers. Peering in each of the windows was like peering into the many vaults of Excess Capital Bank. Each room shimmered with treasures. Silk-upholstered furniture sheened. Glass figurines glistened. Electric lamps wore tasseled lampshades. In stiff black and white uniforms, servants bustled about with chores. They reminded Blister of the penguins he had once seen in Putreska's caverns. He did at last find a sizable gathering of ladies seated in a drawing room. Blister hid inside the flower box bolted to the windowsill, busheled with verbena. Although all the windows around the room were wide open, many of the women waved at themselves with frilly fringed fans. Little tables supported collections of dainty teacups on saucers and silver tier trays globbed with crustless sandwich squares, miniature cakes, and cookies crowned with jam. Jana, frocked in feathers and scales, stood at the center of the room, making what sounded like the closing remarks of an otherwise long speech.
Thank you, one and all, for being here. Not just here at this meeting, but here at the precipice, where the old world terminates and the new one commences. Society, whether it knows it or not, is at a tipping point. Change is not approaching. It is already here.
Her audience applauded.
If you would like to make a contribution towards the rebalancing of our uneven society, please see Mrs. Chettingley before you leave.
Having given these instructions, Jana perched on the edge of a sedan and sipped from a teacup. The ladies gave her a standing ovation. Jana swept her superior gaze across the room, stopping only when she caught sight of Blister. With a sip of warm tea, she camouflaged her signal for him to wait. Blister eyed the uneaten mini-cakes. He wondered how many he could fit in his stomach, and how long he might spend later bragging about it to Muck, who was sure not to get food this fine from Madam Putreska's stores. He settled into the verbena blooms, delighted with his decision to come here. The aforementioned Mrs. Chettingley was a tall, plump woman. Stuffed in a seam-stretched dress, she resembled the kind of blunt weapon one wielded out of urgent necessity, such as a rolling pin.
"Thank you all for coming. Yes, yes,"
she said as she collected crisp cash from the ladies. Mrs. Chettingley had the kind of breathy voice that made even the most mundane statements feel like revelatory announcements. Perhaps as a result, even the stretched buttonholes on her blazer gaped with surprise.
"Let your contribution match your reverence for our most courageous and enterprising benefactress."
She smiled when more money washed into her greedy fists. Her smile consisted mostly of 2 large front teeth, one of which was chipped.
"We owe to this remarkable woman all of our devotion and admiration. Yes, yes. She has persevered in her education against all odds and laws. She has inspired each of us to be more ambitious and aggressive in our efforts to bring about equality. Yes, yes. She has donated limitless funds to our cause. But more important than that, she will stop at nothing until we are freed from our jailhouse of domesticity."
The ladies cheered. Emboldened, Mrs. Chettingley said,
"Yes, yes, released from the shackles that bind us to the kitchen stove."
The cheering swelled. She shouted over it,
"Liberated from our little wardens with their dirty diapers."
The ladies clapped their gloved hands and cheered even louder.
"Yes, yes, absolved from our needle, thread, and thimble prisons. Emancipated from the household penitentiary and its bottomless quarries of laundry."
At the mention of laundry liberation, the ladies frothed over. They shrieked in what seemed to be hysterical joy. At first, Blister marveled at the frenzy. He could not imagine what people did to make laundry so awful. When he had to launder a rag or the fabric of his bedding, he gave it a quick dunk in the river, hung it in the sun, and voila, clean laundry. Jana had to abandon her seat in order to calm the fervor. She thanked Mrs. Chettingley and reminded her that these very important ladies probably had very important schedules to keep. Mrs. Chettingley bowed and gathered the final wads of cash. With the audience gone, Mrs. Chettingley shrugged off her imposing stature. She simpered and wheedled about Jana the way a baby bird begs for regurgitation. She praised Jana's speech and promised to record in the register the full money tally. "Excellent," Jana sighed like a child tired of playing with others. "I need you to draft a check for a new assistant I've hired." Mrs. Chettingley blanched.
"A new assistant?"
"Yes, he's well connected to the supplies we need. Now, off you go. I have another meeting, and I fear I am already late." Jana winked at Blister.
"Another meeting?"
Mrs. Chettingley resisted Jana's efforts to nudge her out of the drawing room.
"I didn't see other meetings in your appointment book. Would you like me to—"
"It came up rather suddenly," Jana said. "I can manage all on my own, thank you. Ta-ta!" As soon as Mrs. Chettingley cleared the room, servants spooled in, but Jana routed them with a firm, "You may clear the room later. I'd like a moment, please." Doors clicked shut, and Jana hurried to the window. Abandoning all ladylike pretenses, she sprinted as if she were 9 and playing tag. "Hello, Blue Rat." She squatted, hands stacked on the casement, chin propped upon them. "You've decided to come after all. I'm so glad. Would you like something to eat?" Before Blister could answer, she wheeled round and snatched a tier tray. "There you are." Blister edged out of the verbena, worried she might streak off into some other sudden activity. He selected a cake and nicked a great chunk from its frosty side. "Tell me, Blue Rat, would you like to help me completely and radically change the world for woman, man, and beast?" "Name's Blister, and so long as I get food like this, I am at your service." She flapped her hands in giddy applause. "Then let us away. I have a little place on Tenebrous Hill, quiet, private, perfect for studies. I'll have the carriage brought round." Before Blister could object, Jana skipped out of the room. Soon enough she emerged on the front steps. A driver and chestnut horse pulled a luxurious landau carriage up to the curb. Jana climbed in, while Blister snuck inside the luggage boot on back, his tail wrapped around a little cake or 3. Will Blister's new alliance with Jana pay off? She certainly is wealthy and powerful. And talk about driven. Jana's personality borders on dollar nothing. On that note, how can one rat help her change the world? Tune in next week to find out if her plan truly makes sense. There's only 2 episodes before we reach the big, shocking Season 1 finale. Now's a great time to stop by blisterandmuck.com and click the subscribe button. That way, you'll be sure to get an email as soon as the season finale releases. And you'll be alerted the minute Season 2 launches. You know how I always say you listeners can send me your favorite jokes and I'll share them on the show? Well, Donna from New Mexico wrote in to share one of her favorites. What do you call a knight who is too afraid to fight? Surrender. If you have a joke to share, use the contact form at blisterandmuck.com or send an email to contact@blisterandmuck.com. Everyone can find the show on Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and just about anywhere else. I appreciate it any time you tell a friend to listen along. In fact, I have sincere gratitude. Special thanks to composer Roland Rudzitis for serving up the Blister and Muck theme song. Kevin MacLeod at the Free Music Archive provided additional music. Week after week, I am grateful for my family, friends, and fans. One for one, and all for you.